In the 1950s, educational psychologist Dr. Benjamin Bloom led a team of researchers and educators who developed a model for educational learning objectives. Their goal was to create a taxonomy to help improve critical thinking skills in schools. The end result was the Taxonomy of Educational Objectives in 1956, but it's more commonly referred to as Bloom's Taxonomy. This model broke learning objectives down into 3 different domains. The first was the cognitive domain, which focused on the acquisition of knowledge. The second was the affective domain, which focused on emotions and attitudes, and it tends to be tied to things like student engagement. And the final was the psychomotor domain, which focused on actions and motor skills. The most prominent of these domains was the cognitive domain, and it's still what many educators use when crafting objectives and learning targets, constructing questions, designing assessments, and coming up with their basic lesson plans. Bloom's taxonomy is often represented as a hierarchy, though it was never explicitly meant to treat lower levels as less than or higher levels as better than. Instead, the bottom levels are foundational and they build progressively up into those higher levels. Here is the original Bloom's taxonomy, which goes from knowledge to comprehension to application to analysis to synthesis and eventually to evaluation. But more recently, scholars have updated this Bloom's taxonomy by taking knowledge out of the cognitive domain and making a new knowledge domain with factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, and metacognitive knowledge. They've also revised the cognitive domain, which is what we're going to focus on right now. The first level is remember, which focuses on the recall or retrieval of information. Students might be able to list the order for classifying organisms, define the symbols on a map, recall how to shoot a free throw, or identify how to search for information online. The second part is understand, which focuses on comprehension rather than just recall. Here, students engage in organizing, translating, and generalizing the information. Students might summarize the key events in a novel, classify government systems given case studies, clarify the next steps in playing an instrument, or explain how they solved a problem. Which leads to the next phase, which is apply. Here, students use prior knowledge in a new situation. It might involve practicing a skill in a new context, or students might provide advice in a given scenario. They might use rhetoric to improve a technique in speech, apply a strategy to a new problem, or carry out a test in a science experiment. The fourth level is analyze, where students examine and break down the information. Here they might identify causes and effects in a historical event or a scientific phenomenon. They might compare and contrast ideas or ideologies, make inferences, look for trends in mathematical data, or find evidence to support their generalizations. The fifth level is evaluate, where students defend opinions, make judgments, and assess information. Students might rank inventions for their impact in history, draw conclusions from a scientific experiment, judge the validity of data in a mathematical set, or assess the quality of a theatrical performance or a work of art. The sixth and final level is create, where students generate something new based on prior knowledge. It might be a new idea, a new solution, or a new system. We should note that there are some valid criticisms of Bloom's taxonomy. First, it treats learning as sequential. But learning isn't always linear. For example, a teacher might start with an evaluation-based question to pique students' interest before doing a hands-on application activity in the apply category. A second criticism is with the use of a hierarchy. This implies specific levels that are dependent on each other as building blocks. But learning sometimes is more like a sliding continuum where you move back and forth as you learn. Furthermore, Bloom's taxonomy relies on a clear distinction between categories. But mental processes are complex and connective and idiosyncratic, and this makes the categories seem, well, kind of arbitrary. Finally, it's outdated. Bloom's taxonomy is a product of its time, the Cold War United States of America, and this was a solid decade before the first humans landed on the moon. This is why some critics argue that a more accurate model of mental processes should be built on our current understandings of neuroscience. And yet, for all of these criticisms, Bloom's taxonomy remains prevalent at both the K-12 and higher education levels. Perhaps Bloom's taxonomy is less of a learning theory and more of a framework, albeit flawed, that reminds us to incorporate critical thinking in the classroom and take learning to a higher level.